The movie begins in the aftermath of Gaddafi's toppling, when local militants raid his large arsenal. This leads to local militant turf wars, which results in Benghazi becoming one of the most dangerous places on earth. Following this, every international embassy shut down, with the exception of a U.S. diplomatic outpost and a CIA base nearby in Benghazi, which come under the protection of the GRS. Following these events, GRS member Jack Silva travels to Benghazi, where he is picked up by Tyrone Roanwoods, the commander of the GRS team, at the airport. After the friends greet each other, they head out to their base. En route, they witness a shooting, and before they realize it, they are boxed in by some local militants. Roan calls to base to call his men for help, but CIA Chief Bob orders Roan's men are not allowed to leave the base. The militants try to force them to open their cars for inspection, but Roan threatens them with drone raids if the militants harm them. This forces the militants' hands, and they let them go. Later on, Roan and Jack arrive at the CIA base. Roan immediately confronts the chief for not sending his guys. Chief rebuffs him and tells Roan he does not want the GRS causing any international incidents, while the locals sort themselves out. They are hired help, not the CIA. After being dismissed, Jack meets the rest of the team, Geist, Tanto, Tig and Boone, his new brother-in-arms. He also surveys the area and is informed to always carry a weapon. Afterwards, he is taken to his room, where he reflects on Becky's disapproval of this mission. Sometime later, Jack meets with Chief, who informs him that it is the government who wants the GRS there and not him. He is adamant that he doesn't want them to cause a misunderstanding with the locals, and that he wants the GRS to stay out of his brilliant CIA staff's way. Later that day, Roan briefs his men about a public meeting between case officers Vayner and Giuliani, and a Libyan oil company executive who Giuliani has been developing for months. Jack is to pose as Giuliani's husband, a disturbing prospect as Giuliani is not a friendly one. The GRS monitors the meeting, and despite the meeting starting out without incident, the GRS quickly realize they are being watched. Roan is forced to interrupt the meeting in order to get out of there. When Jack gets the alert, he immediately drags Giuliani and Vayner back to the car. The CIA agents are highly upset, but that subsides once they realize they are being tailed. After a car chase, Roan causes the tail to lose control and crash into a nearby forklift before he escapes. Sometime later, Jack ends a call with the guilt-tripping Becky and the kids before joining a meeting call with Glenn Doherty, the GRS commander in Tripoli. Glenn informs the GRS that U.S. ambassador to Libya, Christopher Stevens, will be joining them in Benghazi on Monday at the Special Mission compound on a state detail with a small security team. They will be protecting the ambassador once he arrives. Following this brief, the men head to the Special Command Outpost, where they come across some local militants called 17 Feb. After bypassing them, they meet with Scott Wicklund and Dave Ubben, DSS agents protecting the compound. After surveying the compound, GRS men are disappointed to find the DSS under-equipped and the compound highly vulnerable. If any big element attacks the outpost, it is doomed. Nonetheless, Roan lets the DSS agents know that they will be 1 mile away at the CIA post if anything goes down. Just call for help, and they will zoom in. On Monday, the GRS along with local translator Amol meet with irritable local militants, who they calm down with the AMBO, a peace sign, before they buy weapons off so that they can trace the truck and find the supplier. Later on, Ambassador Stevens meets the team and briefs them that it is important to promote peace with the Libyans for the sake of democracy. While most of the team is attentive, Tanto falls asleep. Chief confronts him afterwards and warns him that this is his last chance to act like a professional, or he will send him home. Later on, GRS escort Ambassador Stevens to a meeting with Benghazi's mayor, but are appalled when unauthorized journalists come to cover the event. However, as the ambassador speaks, the event proceeds without incident. Later that day, GRS warns the DSS agents that they were lucky. After clearing this up, the DSS introduces the GRS to Sean Smith, a surveillance specialist hooking up the premises. Following this, the GRS returns to base. The next day, the base carries on routinely while observing the 11th anniversary of the September 11 attacks. The ambassador worries about the security risks surrounding the premises as he notices local Libyans surveying the outpost. Meanwhile, the GRS members communicate with their families back home. It is at this time that Jack learns Becky is pregnant. This proves to be the only remarkable event of the day, as the afternoon passes without event. However, as the sun goes down, local militants begin to gather before attacking the outpost at sundown with rifles and mortars. They catch the ambassador and his DSS by surprise by breaking into the building and shooting everyone in sight. Following the overwhelming attack, Wicklund retreats with the ambassador and Smith into a safe room. Meanwhile, the GRS notice the harrowing events from the CIA base and prepare themselves to assist the ambassador. However, the chief insists the 17 Feb should go instead of them, as they have no jurisdiction in the area, and that the GRS are instruments of last resort. Glenn, who is aware of the situation, calls for a plane to Benghazi. At this moment, the militants approach the safe room menacingly. Back at the base, as Tanto recruits Amal to help them translate when speaking with 17 Feb, Chief insists that Roan stands down. Back in town, Geist extracts Giuliani from another meeting amid the attacks. Meanwhile, news of the attack has just reached the US, just as the militants attack the ambassador and the GRS wait impatiently for clearance to move back at the CIA base. While they wait, the militants set the outpost on fire with Willock, Stevens, and Smith still in the safe room. After witnessing the fire and receiving calls for help, the chief unwillingly relents and the GRS speed off to the outpost. However, on their way, they are intercepted by a militant roadblock, and before Amal can communicate with them, another rival militant group arrives, sparking a shootout. Meanwhile, back at the base, Geist arrives with Giuliani at the base and instructs the chief to lock the building down before rushing out to the outpost. At the same time, Roan and the others approach the outpost and fight off the militants with 17 Feb, all the while shocked at how normal this is to the locals. They take out various militants before finally reaching the outpost, where they find Wickland, who managed to escape without Stevens or Smith, forcing GRS to search for Stevens and Smith in a fiery building. However, they are only able to find Smith, who is dead. Later on, as the GRS gather the surviving DSS agents, Amal tells them the militants intend to rally for another attack. GRS gather whatever they can before preparing to escape. Before they can escape, they fight off another attack before GRS load the remaining DSS agents into a car for their escape. Jack tries to instruct Wickland to turn left once they reach the road so that they can return to the base, but Wickland appears too out of it to comprehend. However, he drives off, leaving the GRS to escape. However, he turns right and drives right into the militants. When they refuse to be abducted by the militants, they turn around and try to escape while facing heavy gunfire, which they are only able to withstand because of their bulletproof car. They manage to reach the base shortly before the GRS. Once they arrive, the chief demands to make a run for the airport after learning the ambassador is missing, but Roan says it's too dangerous. He demands the chief makes a seeking call for help, but the chief says help is out of reach and that they must evacuate. Roan overrides him and declares he is in charge now. Following this, the stunned chief briefs his CIA team on an evacuation plan. Meanwhile, Glenn arrives at Benghazi and heads to the base. Back at the base, as the CIA men destroy records and prepare for evacuation, the GRS prepare for another attack as the militants know where they are holed up. After a while, a local warns them to turn off their lights because it will let the militants know they are there. Shortly afterwards, they realize they are surrounded by encroaching militants, so they brace themselves for the attack. When the militants draw in close enough to attack, they throw grenades into the compound, and this sparks a gun battle. They fight the militants off without suffering any casualties, a small victory. Later on in the night, Glenn finally lands at Benghazi, but is delayed by haggling generals who are vying for the feed to take them to the base. Back in the base, as the GRS and DSS keep guard of the premises and fend off militants, the CIA agents continue calling for help. Roan tells him he understands and lets him join them. Later on, Amal and Giuliani negotiate with the generals to lead Glenn to the base. Roan learns that Glenn is in Benghazi but cannot find their way there because they are unfamiliar with the territory. He tries to engage the local authorities' assistance, but they are being uncooperative. Meanwhile, back at the airport, Glenn warns the generals that if anyone dies at the base because of the delays, he will kill them all. Back on the base, Chief learns that Stevens may have been found in a local hospital. Meanwhile, Giuliani meets Geist on a roof and brings him food. He asks her if they managed to get help from the US, but she tells him it is unlikely. Geist reveals he does not know, but tells her to reach out to her people just in case. Elsewhere, Tanto tries to get Amal to lead to his safety, but Amal believes he's still in it. As Jack reveals he believes that Glenn may head out to Stevens before them if he is still alive, they realize another wave of militants are approaching the building. A few minutes later, the militants launch their attack. After a while, the attack stops and the GRS waits yet again for another attack. Jack reveals he is worried how his family will feel if he died there in a war he knows nothing about. He wonders why he does not stay home and worries about having another man raising his kids. Roan relates and tells Jack he worries about someone else raising his son. Soon, they are interrupted by news that Glenn and the fleet are on their way. They also learn that Stevens has been confirmed dead at the hospital. After learning this, the men prepare themselves for the next wave while coming to terms with the fact that they may not survive this next attack. Sometime later, Glenn arrives with his men and some Libyan soldiers and lifts the morale of the group. However, there is no relief yet as there are too many people to evacuate at the same time. Glenn asks them to hold the base while they get more vehicles. However, the second Glenn leaves, the base falls under heavy mortar and artillery attack. One of the mortars fall and injured Geist, before another falls and kills Roan as he tries to help Geist, whose arm has been severely disfigured. Ubben is also badly injured with a broken leg. As Tig prays over Roan's dead body while Jack mourns nearby, Geist returns inside the base and receives medical help. He is shortly followed by Ubben, whose leg is broken. As the men recover from this onslaught, they are horrified to find another large troop of Libyans approaching the base. As they brace themselves for the final showdown, with Tanto swearing to go down swinging, Tanto observes as the Libyans display the Jambo and realize these are allies. He breaks down from the overwhelming relief. Shortly afterwards, the GRS, DSS, and the CIA evacuate the premises. A despondent chief tries to stay, but Jack forces him to snap out of it, because staying means more men will have to come and save him again. He complies and they evacuate the building. Tanto closes the gates and invites Amel to leave with him, but Amel refuses and apologizes for the embarrassing events caused by his countrymen. When the Americans leave, the Libyans go in and recover their dead. In the final scenes, the evacuees arrive at the airport where they board relief planes. Giuliani and the chief thank Jack and the GRS for their service. Nearby, Tanto gives 17 Fed the keys to their cars, and the freedom fighters run off with the vehicles gleefully. The remaining GPS speculate that the attack was no mere incident and may have been planned weeks in advance, but they are grateful to have had each other to rely on during the attack, while also being grateful to be able to go home. Before they leave Libya, Jack tells Becky about the event before revealing that they have lost Roan and that this will be his last ever tour. He looks at his friend's corpse one last time before they leave Libya. It is revealed that following this incident, Libya fell under international condemnation, and that after this tour, most of the men retired from the service.